So actually, South America has very limited availability. So, CAR Ts have been available in the United States and in Europe for maybe about 6 years, and bispecifics now almost about 2 years. In South America, most of the patients had access through clinical trials. As of now, I believe only Brazil has CAR Ts approved. And then Argentina and other countries only through clinical trials still. The bispecifics are moving further forward a little bit, so those are approved in many of these countries, and most likely are the ones that are going to be the most useful. Yeah, so I mean, these are, if we talk about CAR Ts in particular, these are autologous CAR Ts, and so they have a lot of logistical challenges, and so they do really require a very sophisticated system for these therapies to be delivered. So even in the United States and in Europe, the availability is not like unanimous, right? So you have to be referred to a particular center. So there are patients that may live 2, 3 hours away, and so there's all these sort of kind of issues with that availability. So that gets expanded even further in countries like in Latin America, where you have less economic resources, less centers, right? So for example, in Mexico, for example, they were talking about CAR Ts, and really there's 2 centers in the entire country that would be able to give CAR T. So imagine if you're a patient living potentially a 6-hour flight from a center. So that's part of the problem. So the number of centers available is difficult, and then the patient's economic circumstances can make it even compounded. So bispecifics are a little bit friendlier from that standpoint. They still require a good infrastructure. But you should be able to set it up a little bit easier so that more centers can participate. And I think that's why we're seeing bispecifics really could take more of a hold in Latin America than the CAR T. The truth is, we need more clinical trials in Latin America. So, one of the problems is very much like in Europe. And again, I'm in the US, so I'm a little bit different, but as in Europe, right, something gets approved by the EU, it doesn't mean it's going to be available. It also then has to be funded by the country. And so in Latin America, it's very similar. And so the drugs can be approved, but they're not necessarily funded. And a lot of sort of the reason for that is that there's not enough patients from Latin America that were actually in the trials, or there are no dedicated trials to address the concerns of the governing bodies. And so I think doing trials specifically in Latin America that sort of have an endpoint that helps them to achieve that, I think will go a long ways. Not only do you have access in the clinical trial, but then hopefully then when it gets approved, it's approved because it was done specifically to assist with that funding. Like I said, I think the bispecifics will be the dominant access and use in Latin America, and we'll go beyond. Right now, it's really mostly Brazil, Argentina, and possibly Mexico, and I think it will go to the other countries as well. Hopefully there will be more options. Right now, there's actually only one bispecific that's approved, and we know that there are already three that are approved in other parts of the world, and several others coming. So the hope is that they will also have access to other bispecifics, not just one. The only thing is that, this is, as someone who comes from the United States, where I have availability of a lot of these drugs, and I often get asked to speak in other parts of the world, it's very frustrating to go and speak and tell people of all these things that are coming and huge advances, and then someone from the audience gets up and talks about how they don't even have approval of something that has been standard for 2 decades in our countries. And so I think I'm hoping that gap will start shrinking very quickly, because it would be nice if we become more of a world kind of community and not so disparate.